You see her through a haze of perfumed ambition. Her hair is gold, or is it fire red? No, it's chestnut. It's hard to tell. She's beautiful, that much is known. Her movements are sun-stunned fantasies. The fog parts just enough so you can see her wave. You feel a change in the current. The air is charged. Your heart breaks. She moves away, seemingly without moving. You reach out to touch her. She allows it for a moment, a sweet moment, an embrace so devastating it rearranges your blood cells. It reformats your dreams and refiles them away in crazy places. Your own memories are foreign now, something you've never seen before. You look them over, and while you're doing it, you realize she's gone, disappeared. She's in the corner of your eye, and you give chase. You chase her down sex, lies, and videotape. She leads you through the blockbuster, the political thriller, the art film, the comedy, the tragedy. She leads you through everything, and at every turn she narrowly escapes, your hands closing on a wisp of essence. How long is a man expected to follow this nymph, you ask? You ask yourself, does she exist at all? And just as the impulse of that question reaches the surface of your tongue, as if an instantaneous punishment for the sin, before you know it, there's no longer any trace of the muse. Instead, there's miles of wall, brick wall, impenetrable wall, and you're sure you've only suffered delusions, that you've been dizzy only because you've been banging your head against it all these years, and that the muse was mere phantasmagoria. And the question now becomes, how long am I supposed to bang my head against this imaginary fucking wall? And Steven Soderbergh is now saying enough is enough. That's it. He claims that his latest picture, Side Effects, is to be his last. To quote the man himself, it's a combination of wanting to change personally and a feeling like I've hit a wall in my development that I don't know how to break through. This is a courageous statement to make, one certainly worthy of respect, one lesser filmmakers could never utter. But it's impossible to believe. Impossible coming from the hardest working and possibly the most gifted and intelligent contemporary filmmakers on the scene. Like some of Soderbergh's other films such as Traffic, Contagion, and Erin Brockovich, Side Effects is a thriller formed in the petri dish of socio-political commentary. Here Soderbergh and writer Scott Z. Burns take aim at the pharmaceutical industry, and as in just about all of Soderbergh, the ensemble cast is wonderful, the cinematography is understated and graceful, the direction deft, and the script intelligent and brisk. Emily Teller, played by Rooney Mara, battles with depression, and when her husband Martin is released from prison, instead of feeling overjoyed as one might expect, she instead sinks deeper into an emotional abyss. After a suicide attempt, fate casts upon her Dr. Jonathan Banks, played by Jude Law. Banks is a psychiatrist who's well-intentioned but opportunistic. While he genuinely wants to help his patients rise from out of their quagmire, he also has no qualms about freely prescribing antidepressants, even new ones just released on the market. With the prospect of making some extra dough, he takes part in a research study. He puts Emily on a Blixa, and the fictional drug it has terrible side effects. But not just for his patient, for the doctor as well. To say any more about the plot would do an injustice to you in the film. Let's just say that the sociological implications are just a catalyst for plot points that turn on a dime. Soderbergh's commentary is fairly understated, mostly presented in offhanded ways. It's as if he's saying, we all know about the problem of industry-created zombies, and if you don't already, you better catch up, pal, because we're moving along. And move along he does. The film quickly falls into the familiar rhythms of the classic film noir. There's a terrifically underplayed murder scene. There's not one femme fatale, but two. And Banks, as the noir anti-hero, is a man whose life is chewed up by the insidious hands of fate. He must desperately scratch and claw against tyrannical forces in order to reclaim his life. Now, in light of his recent statements, it's hard not to think that Soderbergh feels nothing more than his usual apparent cool detachment for his protagonist. That he also feels like a man who is victimized by the machinations of a merciless industry. And that it is only if he can somehow figure out how to use and manipulate that industry will he be able to restore order and sanity to his life. And becoming a dirty player in a dirty game, whether it's pharmaceuticals or movies, is an ugly, soul-shitting prospect. Who can blame the guy for wanting to disappear to read novels, paint on canvases, and import foreign hooch? Who can blame him for wanting to stop banging his head against the wall over and over and over again, just so he can share with us his fleeting vision of that sprite we call the Muse? Look, the guy's put out something like 26 films in 25 years. All of them are worth watching, and some of them are damn fine works of cinema. Pound for pound, he may be the best of the generation. Indeed, at the heart of Side Effects is how depression is essentially an inability to construct a future. And my guess is that Soderbergh just needs a break, and sooner or later, he'll come back punching with a vision of how to construct that future. I hope so. Till then, relax, Mr. Soderbergh. Kick up your feet, drink a fruity drink with an umbrella in it, underneath a palm tree in some warm clime. Pretend not to see the muse, or do whatever you can to ignore her for as long as you can. We'll leave the light on. But let me close this out with his words. If I'm going to solve this issue, it means annihilating everything that came before and starting from scratch. That means I have to go away, and I don't know how long it's going to take. And I also know you can't force it. I love and respect filmmaking too much to continue to do it while I'm running in place. That's not a good feeling. And if it turns out I don't make another one, I'm really happy with this last group of movies. I don't want to be one of those people about whom people say, wow, he kind of fell off there at the end, because that would be depressing. So, pretty intense film, you know, and it's, as in all of Soderbergh, it's a thriller that's understated and not your usual fare for thrillers. And you know, it was hard for me to believe that, you know, it's not something that's going to knock your socks off or wow you or feel like you've been punched in the head like, you know, a James Cameron movie or something like that. But when I was sitting there thinking that might be this guy's last movie, I was like, you know, I really enjoy these films, and it's gonna suck if, you know, he's just had enough and doesn't want to do it anymore,
It'll
or is
suck
not
not
going
to
to come back.
have another Soderbergh movie you know is going to be coming out next year, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love going and checking out his films when they come out, and I love renting them for sure if I can't catch all of them. And some of them you can only catch on rental. So,
Yeah.
how do you feel about
Well,
Soderbergh? I know you're a fan of his
well,
cinematography,
it's
right?
really funny, man. There was a there's a series of questions in my head. There's a bunch of tangled up issues. And the two biggest ones are having to disentangle the conversation about Soderbergh retiring from the conversation about the actual the thing itself, as a as a fellow writer of ours would say, the film.
Yeah.
You know, like it's kind of hard to judge the film just by itself when you have this sort of halo of this is the last Soderbergh film we may ever see. And
I know it kind of overshadows the movie,
yeah,
which is okay. I mean, we can't. We it would have been nice to devote, you know, a whole episode to this and have everybody on, but
we'll have to
you
do
know,
a
this is
Soderbergh retrospective, man. You know.
we probably
You
should,
know, he's
yeah.
got another one coming out for HBO, the Liberace biopic, which rumblings are that it's really good, with
Yeah,
Michael Douglas and Matt Damon, I believe.
who have a steamy kissing scene,
Well,
from what I
they're
understand.
lovers. I mean, they're boyfriends in the movie. So apparently, I think Soderbergh said with a wink, it's really gay, everyone. So it should be. It's looking like it's going to be a really fun movie. So.
Well, it'll be nice because it'll be his comedy, you know, and he's always going from one to the other,
Well, he
and
said it's not, you know, it's actually a really heartfelt movie. It's just there's funny stuff in it, but it's not
uh
meant to be, you know, straight up comedy. But you know, I mean, to answer your question, I really got into this movie. The movie itself also branches out in many directions because I love, you know, I love the 70s thrillers by Alan Pakula, like
mm.
The Parallax View and All the President's Men, and you know, also 80s thrillers like Fatal Attraction, which are the source material that these guys are drawing from.
Yeah,
Klute, have you ever seen Klute?
no, but I know I just
Donald
reading I
Sutherland and I think it's Jane Fonda is in that. Um,
okay, I'll have to check it out. But you mentioned Fatal Attraction. I know that he obsessively watched this film, you know,
right.
in preparation.
So I mean the thing itself, I love these movies and I love, you know, it is like sad to think that there's not too many people who are doing these movies that have incredibly understated scripts and great performances and you know, it's not the thrills are in your mind, you know. It's not slam bang action up there on the screen.
Right.
There's this sinuous subversive thing that's happening in the story itself, you know. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, even the action scene is like so understated, but
right.
it's so powerful,
Yeah.
man. I mean, you know, like the way that he played that center, and you know, I didn't know anything about this
Me
film.
either.
I haven't read anything about it, so I hesitate to you know, give out spoilers here. And this isn't really a spoiler, but there is the one action oriented scene in the film is just so, it's like riveting, man.
Yeah.
I mean, even as understated as it is, and yeah, man, it's nice to see understated films
Yeah.
and action that, you know, plays in your mind, you know.
Yeah. And I mean I really got into well, I mean first of all, I think we can, without spoiling too much, we can say that it's a movie with twists. So the way Soderbergh and the screenwriter Scott Burns described it was there's movie A, there's movie B, and there's movie C, and it mutates through the course of
Mm,
the film, you know. And my I guess my first question would be to you. Were you surprised by how it twisted? And the second question would be, were
absolutely.
you pleasantly surprised?
I had very few qualms, complaints about the film at all, like maybe one or two, but it felt like, because I didn't read anything. I didn't even read the synopsis. I had no friggin' idea.
Right.
It wasn't until
It
halfway
was
into the
great. I hadn't
movie.
even seen a trailer for this. Like, I think I saw
Yeah,
one
me either.
trailer like 6 months ago or something, and I
And
disregarded it, you know?
yeah, and really, that's the way to go and watch movies, in my
Absolutely.
opinion. I let when I read reviews of films, it's only after I see
Yeah.
the movie, and I hope that you guys, before even listening to this further, that you go and see the film because it's really worth checking out. But to answer your question, is it starts to be like I had no idea where it's going, So as soon as I start to figure out where it's going, it turns, and then I'm like, oh well, then he's going here, and then it turns again, and I
Your
was
inertia
just
is trying to catch up with the momentum of the narrative, you know?
yeah, and the one thing that I really enjoyed, and this is just an example of how in control of his form he is that the dude you have to work to put these to pick the pieces together of what's happening on
Mm-hmm.
screen. Like you have to sort of figure out what the motives are behind the villain, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
to not to give too much away, and to sort
Well,
of
even to figure out who the villain is.
yeah, to figure who the villain is, and then why they're doing it. And just as you're starting to piece it together along with the protagonist, the Jude Law character, that's when he tells it all to you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But you feel like you're working to do it, and then like in a lesser film or with a lesser filmmaker, they sort of hit you over the head with it as it's going along, and it's really obvious, and then they usually tell you way too early, or like they tell you something that you already know,
Yeah.
where Soderbergh realizes that as an audience member, you're just putting it together, and then he'll flash it to you, and then you're like, oh yeah, so it's like you're having that realization with the film. You know
That
what I mean?
quality, I think no one hits that sweet spot better than Soderbergh, and he does it consistently in every single film. It's ridiculous how finely tuned he is. Because on the one, you can go more opaque, like a movie like Primer, you know, where it's just
Mhm.
so opaque you can't even, no one can figure that out with less than 20 viewings of the film, right? And
Right.
then you have just the sort of standard Hollywood thing where everyone has to, it's like you're teaching preschool, and you have to
Right.
make sure everyone understands three times over before you move on to the next plot point,
Right. That is the
and
worst.
that it's
I mean,
very
that's the
insulting,
worst.
because it's like, well, I'm a grown person. I've seen movies before. I can figure this movie out, whatever. But
Right. Or like
Soderbergh gets just enough ahead of you where he knows he's making sort of Hollywood pictures, right? So he
right.
knows he can't completely leave you in the dust, right?
Right.
But he also does not insult you. Even in his most popcorn movie, he won't insult you. Like the Ocean's pictures are fun because he's staying just ahead of you. So it's like a little, dance routine he's doing with the audience. This one, he
Right.
stays a little further out in front of you because he knows he's working a film noir.
Right, right. Well, I mean, the other way is just as insulting in a lot of ways, to obfuscate too much of what's going on and to be too opaque in what's
And
happening is
self-indulgent.
it's a bit of self-indulgent, and to find that line, it becomes a matter of personal preference.
Totally.
You know what I mean, on how much you want to follow in the film and stuff. So,
Yeah.
but I thought it was handled really, really well.
Yeah. Did you notice the shooting style that he did where there's almost no camera moves in the entire movie?
Yeah, the cinematography is something that I wanted to bring up with you. It's really understated and really simple. It was shot very like this. I'm sure. Well, let me just say this. When I was watching the film, I was like, man, I really wish I had time before we got on this morning to take a look at some of his other works, because he jumps from such different and varying genres and approaches to filmmaking that it's hard to sort of wrap your head around everything that he's doing.
Yeah.
And that's good, but I would like to have seen more of his stuff to kind of have a reference for a discussion here. But I felt this one fell in line with stuff that he's been doing recently, like Contagion and that Haywire film.
I haven't
You
seen
know,
Haywire. I saw The Informant, and of course I saw Contagion. I thought it shared DNA with Contagion and with The Informant, visually and thematically too.
yeah. So why don't you pick? I mean, you're a cinematographer, man, and I know. Listen, when we shot Time Travelers last year, I know that Soderbergh was one of our
References, yeah,
references. As cinematographically speaking.
yeah.
Why don't you give me what your thoughts are on
Oh,
this?
I've, geez, yeah. There's sure, and then after that, I'll offer a nuanced critique of the Sistine Chapel, brushstroke by
Well,
brushstroke.
I mean, yeah, you obviously have some sort of just a emotional reaction to, or
Well,
just like,
he's brilliant. I mean, and it takes a little while to realize how brilliant it is. I mean, he photographs his own movies under a pseudonym.
is that right?
Yeah.
Is there any indication if this was one of those cases? I'm not sure
I
how
don't
that
know, but
actually.
there's a pretty consistent style throughout his stuff, and it's the same as it's his style. So even if
Mhm.
he's working with a DP, I guarantee you, it's he's more of a gaffer than a DP. Not no insult to anyone he's working with, to go into the time travelers thing, it actually is pretty funny. There's hospital scenes early in the movie. I think there's a waiting room scene, and it was lit exactly like we lit the waiting room scene in Time
Mm,
Travelers. And I was like,
is that right?
"Hey, there it is." It's like the bad hospital lighting, but the sort
Right,
of Hollywood painterly version of bad hospital lighting.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me it's very simply lit. Like it's not very expressionistic. It seems like it's rooted in reality
Yeah.
based cinematography. Correct?
Yes, and the thing that he pulls off that's really, again, he's one of the most subtle filmmakers of the last 25 years. He nudges it in a direction where it's so perfectly framed and lit that you don't even realize how good it is what he's doing. Because it
Yeah.
doesn't announce itself. It's not, up there in your face. Like it's a film noir, but he doesn't light it, with strong shadows to the side and everything. The one thing he
Right.
does consistently is he backlights characters pretty frequently, where the
Hmm.
background is kind of bright and their face is almost completely in shadow, except for just a very subtle fill. And
Mm.
so it looks realistic because that's how things look in real life, when you're standing against a window or when you're in a brightly lit room or whatever. But it's kind of like it's kind of a new twist on film noir, lighting styles. So,
Oh yeah, well, I mean, it's so. I mean, it's film noir in its story, I would say, but it's certainly not in the way
right.
that it's photographed. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Let's
So,
go to directing a little bit. Eventually, I'd love to talk about the script because this guy is Scott Burns is an amazing writer. He also wrote The Informant, which was one of my favorite screenplays of the last 10 years.
mm,
But directing wise, a little bit, I noticed in conjunction with the static shot thing, there's this really brilliant, just like 5 shot sequence in a courtroom scene where again he's not moving the camera around at all, but uh, there's this shot where he basically moves you, or this sequence where he moves you around a courtroom, where there's like a shot of the judge, and the judge looks off to the side, and then there's a shot of someone on the stand, and then there's the way the dialogue and the shots work. It's in conjunction with the judge talking to the lawyer talking to the person on the stand, and then the jurors, and it's almost like a comic book the way he takes you
mm.
panel by panel, relating you to all the elements. And there's none of this like 180-degree shooting line type thing at work there. It's just it's almost like your mind is making the connection between these shots and setting up the geography without there being a wide establishing shot.
Yeah, man. I mean, the courtroom is such a familiar trope in movies, and Soderbergh's such a notorious for studying movies
Yeah,
and that. So I think those compositions are probably,
out of old movies.
yeah, right out of old movies. Especially, like I did note that one shot that was behind Jude Law, which was really a really nice shot, and the the costume. It was right then too that I noticed the costuming and the production design. All everybody's in like dressed in these grays, blacks and whites and grays, and it's really nicely designed as well.
Yeah.
You know, the
And
picture.
he does this thing in the movie, and this is I think it's consistent with The Informant especially. The main color of the palette is yellow,
Right.
which is really it's appropriate because it's based on tungsten lighting, and
Hmm.
your typical lighting if you're indoors, you don't really notice it because your eye automatically white balances, but most interiors are very, very yellow compared to a very, very blue exterior. And he's consistently been using that palette for a while now. I mean, even as far back as the Limey, that's
Hmm.
in there. And it's on overdrive in this movie, and it creates this
Yeah.
like melancholy, fog that sort of hovers around these characters, related to the pharmaceutical theme, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Well, talk. Let's talk about that for a bit. How are you feeling about his socio-political commentary here and pharmaceuticals? I mean, he's flirting a bit with being pedantic in that it could start to get preachy or something like that. And I thought that just again, he's got such a good handle on the material that just as it's about to feel like it's kind of like a bit of propaganda, it moves straight into your familiar thriller, not cliches, but those dynamics of the film noir and the thriller. But yeah, having the pharmaceutical thing play as a backdrop, I mean, I think it's something he's always had, commentary sort of in the background, but I rarely feel like he's preaching. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he always, I think, uh, going back to the informant again, it's this kind of thing where he takes an element of the zeitgeist, as he and the screenwriter referred to it, and they just use it. They get out in front of it, Like I think you mentioned in your review that it's it plays. It's the starting point, but it ends up somewhere else completely,
Hmm.
and because yeah, you phrased it really good. But everyone, it's like the Leonard Cohen song, "Everybody knows," So
Right.
how do you surprise people with that? And there was a point in the movie where I think this is probably the same point you were referring to, where you think you know what the rest of the movie's going to be about. You're about halfway through, and you think you know what the rest of the movie's going to be about, and all of a sudden it just turns and
Right.
you almost fall out of the car, and you're like,
Right.
whoa, that was a sharp turn, and all of a sudden you're like, you sit up straight in your seat and you're like, holy shit, this is not so much about the preachiness and all that stuff. There's a whole other plot that just revealed itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to walk into a movie in the theater and realize that the filmmakers have certain expectations for the intelligence level of the audience.
Right.
Like they expect you to be aware
Yeah.
of the issues surrounding the drugs. So there's no need to beat your head over it, but they'll show you, they'll give you a small glimpse of what it's like to sit at a table with a drug rep,
Yeah.
or how a study works, because not everybody's privy to that, but you don't need to bang it over everybody's head.
Yeah.
So they'll unroll this sort of series of scenes where it gives you an insight to what's happening behind the scenes of this and what the effects might be, and just this, it's just a bed, and it's funny because another picture would revolve all around that, but what ends up happening here becomes something that's more traditionally movie
Mm.
driven. You know what I mean? Like, so you have, like, in another film, it would all be about the drug industry
Right.
and how the drug reps get their comeuppance or
Right.
something like that. But here it plays as the bed, of which this really human, or I guess cinematic drama happens.
Yeah, I mean, I will probably watch this movie again. I had a slightly mixed reaction to it becoming what I saw. In one regard, I could argue that it backs itself into a genre corner.
Right.
And Soderbergh himself described it as reverse engineering the movie from the end backward.
Which is something that I've learned that you sort of need to do in a film noir when there's plot points like this, like
Yeah.
just from my own sort of tinkering with the genre and writing couple of those scripts, you kind of take the end and then you work backwards, and then you realize that nobody knows the audience doesn't know what the end, hopefully they don't know what the end is. And so those plot points, even though they seem so obvious to you because you work them backwards, they become surprises.
Right. Right, exactly. Well, I mean, the thing is, like, I could, part of me wants to see a more of a, you know, I feel like there's a way that you can take something and like a theme, like the pharmaceutical theme, and make the film itself, the plot itself somehow becomes an embodiment of that, and it's very hard for
Right.
me to describe that. And I
I understand. It's a form and function type of thing where the message is part of the is like inseparable from the story.
right, right, and
You
it's
know.
I think that interesting things come out of that because I think it's an organic process that it's one way to give rise to new forms because there's experiences that you have in life that don't specifically fit the
Mm,
templates of cinema, right?
mm,
And so you can create a new template because we're having new experiences every day, right? And I don't think this movie quite does that. I think it takes the pharmaceutical thing and then it's sort of, again, I feel like it backs itself into a genre corner a little. And I
right.
can take
So
that or
you're
leave it a little bit, but it's so well
so
done.
you're
I
you're
have
saying
respect
so.
for it.
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying. It's a really fine point. I mean, taking the what's at the root of the film, the theme of the film, and that's tied as of pharmaceuticals, and having what's individual or unique about that theme,
Hmm.
and how you feel
And then
about
it's
it,
kind
and
of swept aside,
and have that dictate what happens
Right.
in the and yeah, that's
I mean, the
interesting.
great thing,
It's
the reason I keep bringing up The Informant is that it's so hugely a movie that comes out of that guy's brain. The main
right.
character, you're in that main character's universe. And so
Yeah.
there's this, it's not really a thriller, it's not really a comedy, it's not really a drama,
Right.
it's not even about, Monsanto and corn oil and or corn syrup and
Uh-huh.
all this stuff. It's just about that character. And, in a way, I kind of wish that this movie had been more about something like that.
Well, I mean, I think that there was an attempt to do that because at one point the Jude Law character, I think Dr. Banks or whatever, he actually, and I don't think it was this was really pressed upon, but at one point he becomes sort of depressed and a little bit crazy,
Hmm.
and you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So he's got to, and again, this sort of becomes I guess it's sort of a cliche that he becomes in a sense like the villain
Yeah.
that he's trying to get out from under. So like, and he becomes somebody who's almost on drugs and trying to construct his
Right.
future, you know what I mean?
That's
So
what I was thinking that as I was watching it, I was kind of starting to think. I think he even asks one of his fellow doctors at some point for a drug to help him
right,
with.
Adderall
Yeah.
to
And I was
sharpen him
like,
up.
you know what? On a second viewing, I bet I'm going to see a new layer because I didn't even expect. I mean, in a way, I feel like you calling Jude Law the protagonist is even a giveaway. Like, I feel like that's a spoiler
I
because
know, I know. We've been doing good without doing the spoiler
yeah,
one.
but
So
for the first half
the,
of the for the first half
right.
hour, you're not even going to think of Jude Law as the protagonist. You know?
Right. That's why I really suggest anybody. We're not going to give spoilers, and we've been careful not to here. But I suggest again, just press upon this to go see the movie before you read anything about it because it's really worth it. But we were talking. So you mentioned one of your complaints about the film. The only one that I had, and I thought that this one just didn't play, as expertly, wasn't presented as expertly as Soderbergh's capable of, is that his. Oh, I don't know if this is a spoiler, man. His life,
Spoiler
when
alert.
okay, when things start to unravel for him, it happens a little bit too perfectly. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's just for a perfect series of events, and I don't know. It felt a
There's
little bit.
always that film noir danger that you're talking about I mean, let's just go spoiler crazy from here on out and until closing. You're talking about the whole double cross thing, like
Yes. So yes, well, specifically when, God, his wife
oh
gets
right,
pissed off at him, and he loses his job. Like all those things sort of happen, like
right.
within in a
Like
nutshell, kind of.
it's all unraveling so perfectly only a screenwriter could devise it.
Right, like it was just a little, but I understand that need for like, look, I don't know if it's worth complaining about even because you don't want to get mired down in it so like in doing this whole character study in the middle of a film that's purporting to be a
Yeah.
thriller. You know what I'm saying? So you need to kind of move it along. But that really was the almost the only complaint that I had
I
about
do think that area of the film gets uh, some of the wheels start to come off the road a little bit. Like it's, ooh, I think this thing is going to lose control any second. You know?
Well, you know what it is? It's like I think that it's right there where it transitions from being what we were talking about, where it's a meditation on
Right.
the industry, to it sort of metamorphosizes into
And you're like, oh, I bought a ticket for one movie and I got a different movie.
right. But how about I mean the cast is pretty incredible, right? I
Rooney
mean,
Mara is kind of impressing me right now, I have to say.
yeah, I mean she was the actress in Fincher's version of what is it? The
The
girl
dragon tattoo.
girl with the dragon tattoo. Yeah, she's pretty incredible. Although it was very difficult for me to watch her in that Fincher film because I love the way is it Noomi
Yeah,
Rapace
yeah.
played it in the original version of it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was kind of dragon tattooed out by the time I got to Fincher and Rooney Mara. But yeah, I mean, she was good in that definitely, and she's pretty amazing in this because I think the subtleties of her pharmaceutical moods in this movie she
Uh-huh.
does really well. And at the same time, I mean, there's like three layers to what she's doing. So,
I know, it's great. And then at the end, like the last shot, it's like I want more, I want to look at her more.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like I want to really study her now. Now that everything, in light of everything that's just happened, you want to take a close look and see how she's going to play this. But you only get like one shot of it or two shots of it.
yeah, yeah. Well, Soderbergh had some interesting comments about that. He said that he worked on the first 35 minutes of this movie more than all the rest of the movie because
Uh,
you really had to become involved in in her character and what she was up to. And part of what he did was doing as many close-ups of her as possible with
hmm
characters and environments sort of surrounding her. But she was basically framed by her hair, and then there was, out of focus things happening in the background. Do you have any comments about sort of that directorial style? And I mean, when you watch Soderbergh movies, I kind of get the feeling that you personally study a lot of the things that he's doing. Did you have any
Well,
thoughts?
well, I certainly do love personal dramas, man. And I love, I think, Ford said, what's that anecdote that John Wayne went over to John Ford one time and said, well, we're in the middle of Monument Valley here. What are we going to go shoot today? He's like, well, we're going to go and shoot the only thing worth filming, actually, the human face, and
Yeah,
I mean, like I really subscribe to that, and I think that in my own like what I was exploring with time travelers is the long lens thing, and really just examine like really closing in on the face and feeling like there's a like trying to establish this sort of tandem line of between the camera and the face, which I really like, and I think especially as movies start to be consumed more and more in on computers and in hands, I think the close up is something like you can. I love seeing subtleties of like little movements and faces. Like, oh, there was one beautiful one in this film that he did. Jude Law. Oh God, it's so good. He's sitting across from the Mara character, or the Emily Taylor character. He's like inspecting
mm,
her as if like he's trying to figure out what she's doing,
hmm,
and there's just the slightest glance of his eye,
yeah,
and it was probably just incidental, but Soderbergh cuts away with it as soon as right after that movement of his
mm,
eyes, and it's so effective. And yeah, man, I mean, what else do we have in life except the human face? I mean, we're infants, and that's all we the a human face is like the sky to us,
Yeah.
from the moment we're born,
Yeah,
so
yeah. He was talking about that a bit about the just going to your point about the cutting there, the how much he discovers films in editing and the change in narrative that you can get from that kind of cut that you just talked about. The little, you're on a close up of someone and something happens and then you cut away and there's a story there that's not written in the screenplay
right.
and it's not planned in advance and anything and there's this beautiful music that emerges out of that.
Yeah, I mean it's an echo chamber sort of, because you want your whole film to resonate when people leave the theater.
Right.
You want the payoff to resonate. In the denouement, you want every shot to resonate into the next shot. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's like this thing of going closer and closer in.
What do you think of his, did you pay attention to the cutting in this? Because I know you're a bit of an editing junkie yourself.
I always have trouble analyzing any editing because you don't know all the material that they have. So I think it's sort of foolhardy, or an effort, exercise in futility to try to assess the editing,
Because
like
you
really.
can't assess what you haven't seen.
Yeah, because 90% of
Right.
editing is sifting through tons of material and figuring out what to cut away. And so that process of elimination, and that, how the editor chooses what to use, that's what editing is. So unless you know what he's choosing from, it's difficult to know. But I mean, listen, you could see in the Oceans pictures and some of his sort of snazzier pictures, like oh shit, out of sight. How good he is, or how good his editor is.
Yeah.
What's your take there?
Yeah, I kind of feel like Soderbergh has had a ghostly hand on your shoulder the last 10 years. Both in I think framing a movie, like framing the individual shots and thinking about how they piece together in editing. So, I mean, am I imagining that?
Well, certainly in Time Travelers, man. I mean, I definitely look to Soderbergh on Time Travelers, but I think sort of like Soderbergh is that every time I'm going to gear up for another picture, I'm going to take a look at a different film or work body of work. I think we're sort of planning a Jan Svankmajer reverie coming up soon, and I think I'm going to gear up for something more along those lines for the next little project that I work on. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, this is the first time I've considered how much he references other films, and it's funny. There's a side of that is, I listened to your guys' Django Unchained episode finally.
The infamous
The
Django Unchained.
infamous. That is some rambunctious podcasting right there, man. And
You should hear the episode that's coming out with Sarah on it, and Bill Shetty coming out next Thursday, gang.
I can't wait. It's yeah, if it's any comparison to the Tarantino Django episode, you're in for a ride. I was exhausted by it. I felt like I needed a shower and a shoulder massage after.
Yeah, word has it Tarantino actually listened to that
That's
show,
what
but
I
I guess that's
hear.
neither here nor there. I guess we can get into that down the road. It's pretty cool to hear, man.
Yeah, but it just it was a really good episode. It was a really good argument about almost something that I don't think any of you could put your finger on exactly, but it has to do with the inheritance of past media and
Mm,
how there's a line somewhere between paying homage to something and learning from it and pulling out the cliches and the tropes that work and are durable enough to be used for another purpose, like in
right.
corporate speak to repurpose something, but to really take those gears that are solid and work and reliable and they're going to last another 150 years and put them into a new machine,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
in almost a way you have this perfect symmetry between the Tarantino way of doing that and the Soderbergh way of doing that,
Mm,
and I think both guys, you can make an argument for innovation, but I also for whatever reason I kind of prefer the way that Soderbergh pulls it off because um I think new forms do emerge out of what he's doing, You know, they're subtle, but they're there. You know, he's very much a scientist, so he's not, you know, he's not going to wow you with passionate filmmaking. But there's subtle things that he's doing that you know that were you know, they referenced a movie like the screenwriter and him referenced repeatedly movies like the '70s stuff like Dog Day Afternoon, and
Hmm.
Dog Day Afternoon is fucking brilliant because you think you're in for a bank heist movie, and then it turns
Right.
out that the, the reasons for the bank
That's
heist
great.
are insane. And then it turns out it's not a bank heist movie. It's a slow burn drama about is this guy going to get out of the situation alive? And then it turns into this like rah rah cheer. Like it mutates so many times over the course of the movie because they have respect for the cliches they're dealing with, but they're assembling them in this way that you're hearing new music in your mind, you know?
Right, right. Yeah, you know, it's an involved discussion. Obviously, I actually brought it back out on the Lincoln discussion, but I guess it also becomes a question of the what your muse is essentially. Like, is the muse just other works? Because then it becomes sort of cannibalistic,
Yeah,
right? It
yeah.
becomes start to feed on itself, you know. So I love Tarantino's films, man. Listen, I mean, I love watching them, right? But I do prefer other sort of works where people are not are being more, I don't want to say even courageous, but like actively seeking something that is entirely new, you know, like it's an endeavor of madness to do that. And it's hard to do, but there are people who do it, you
Yeah.
know, who, I mean, it's difficult, and I don't want to get back into Tarantino, but the subject matter of a muse is interesting, you know, and where Tarantino's muse are other pictures, and I think Soderbergh's is as well. You know, it ties into why is Soderbergh abandoning the muse right now, you know, and I think it's a good way to sort of end this conversation and how you're feeling about why he's leaving, and is it something where that he's not exactly what you're saying is that, or what we're saying is that he's not able to find something new or any new way to sort of reinvent himself or the genre, or you know, is he running in place, or you know what I mean? Like I'm
Yeah, I don't know, and I just I kind of applaud him, and I you know I was thinking about the Coppola career arc and how he sort of disappeared for a while because he felt like he lost it, and then came back, and with all due respect to the maestro himself, it's been really patchy, you know, his
hmm
return from the beyond, you know, from his respite and everything, and it's funny. There's even a parallel where he's Soderbergh's now importing this Argentinian hooch or whatever
right.
it is, you know? And I was like, well,
Yeah.
he's retired, man, for life. He's set. He invested here, there, and everywhere, and he doesn't have to ever make another film again, you know? So it's going to be interesting if he comes back. But you know, you wrote this really beautiful prologue to your review about chasing the muse through the fog and then finding yourself at a brick wall. You know, it's you painted very Ingmar Bergman dreamlike imagery into my head when you did that. But it's I I mean, I'm no friggin' artist, man, but if you've ever put pen to paper, there's you find yourself in the middle of the night in negotiations with your muse, like a you know, it's either a beautiful woman or a hooker or some form of you know pleading and you know wheeling and dealing, and you know there comes a certain point even on small scales where you know you make promises to listen and to get something done for whatever that muse is, and then other times you just have to turn your back and say quit being a bitch, like seriously you have to step forward and come to me now, like I'm working my ass off for you. You need
Right.
to, there's an equal partnership here and I can't be running around chasing you like a slave dog, you know.
Well, I mean, it's tiring. It's exhausting. Like I said, you know, when you're chasing that muse, it's an,
Well, and part of it too is
it
if you turn your if you stop and you turn your back on it, you know, it's like any relationship. That other person is gonna that's gonna have an effect on them, and there's a pretty good chance that they're gonna realize that they need to, you know, step forward to you. You know, like you know what I'm saying? I don't know if I'm
yeah, well,
describing it right.
sometimes, yeah, I mean, sometimes when you're chasing something, the harder you chase it, the further away you push it.
Right,
You know what I mean?
right.
And like you may grab it every once in a while, but it's really painful, man, to always be asking yourself, what am I doing this for? Who am I? And that's what's at the bottom of it, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's difficult to do that. Who am I? What do I have to say? What am I offering new? And I think that you know, filmmakers like Soderbergh, and I even think, you know, and I actually think Tarantino does it as well. You know, they're asking themselves why and what they're doing, and you know, that's tough stuff, especially when you're doing it in you know, in the middle of an industry that's so full of shit.
Yeah.
You know what I
Well,
mean?
I
Like,
mean, as far as his reasons particularly, he had a phrase in that interview that you cited in your review is really great, and we should put up a link to it.
yeah, what is it again?
It's vulture.com, I think. It's vulture. Yeah, I don't know
All
exactly.
right,
It's
I'll
an
put up a
offshoot
link.
of newyorkmag.com, I believe. So yeah, let's put up a link to that. But it's really great, and he has a phrase in there, the tyranny of narrative, and
Hmm.
how he struggles with it. And on the one hand, I get what he's saying, you know, but then there's always a Harmony Korine out there who's, you know, who's doing the thing that he's talking
Yeah.
about, you know?
Well, that's what I mean. Like, I think, you know, he just needs to walk away. It's just what he's saying. You walk away, and
Yeah,
then you think, all right, I don't need to try so hard,
yeah,
or I don't need to take it so seriously. And I think that he's made attempts to do that in the past. Like, he's purposely made films with heavy financial restraint on them just to see how he can wiggle out of it.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, they,
And you know, that tyranny thing is an interesting quote, because I just read an interview with Philip Roth, who also is just said that he's thrown in the towel, and he almost used very similar language. I think he said, "I'm done trying to beat my sentences into submission," you know, and it's just, and you know, here's another guy who's not going to stop doing it.
yeah,
You know, he's already doing something, like he's already sort of
yeah.
dictating his autobiography to some, or biography to, you know, a writer of his choice. And I don't think that Soderbergh is going to be able to stop it, and I think I hope not
You
anyway.
know, I was at an Andrew Bird concert a month ago, and he, you know, he's a great experimenter of music, and he before he played this one tune, I'm just gonna have to paraphrase him, but he said, you know, these tunes come to me, and I work them out, and they're beautiful, and they're totally meaningless except for whatever sound that they're making and how that makes you feel, and he said he really loves to play those a lot for audiences before he ever has to sit down and actually make lyrics for them, and he I wish I could remember his phrase, but it was something along the lines of shackle them with meaning. And
Mm.
you know, I
Right.
think about the great films, you know, the great films in history. You never get really care about the plot points. You never really care about, you know, in the long run, you care about the mood and the secret music behind a film and the
All
way it
right.
makes you feel, not the
Right.
story and the characters and all that stuff. And there's this other dimension to it, man. It's really beautiful if you can get there, you know.
All
But
right.
you
Get
was sorry, man. What was that?
just getting that, you know, when you strip away all the language and the rules and the devices of your chosen art form, at the bottom of all of it is, you know, emotion, you know,
Yeah.
the human experience
All
of
those
what it
things are just
feels.
outlines you're sketching around something that's pretty diaphanous, you know, pretty untouchable. Yeah.
Right.
But
Right.
the last point that I think we should maybe close on is that you brought up the financial angle, and boy, I mean, you and I have kind of been dabbling in the lower, you know, the lower depths of film financing and everything, and
We are the bottom
we are
feeders.
the bottom
We're the
feeders, but
crabs of the
we're
film.
scuttling claws on dry seabeds. But
That's right.
you know, I don't know too much about it, man. But the general state of finances, you know, the financial world, I feel like the hedge betters and the accountants are running the show pretty much, you know, soup to nuts. And you know, you even hear about, you know, George Lucas sold his entire company because he, you know, he said. You know, it's so expensive to make your money back on a film anymore. It's just tiring. I mean, Soderbergh has said the same thing.
Hmm.
Pretty much everyone has said it's so tired. Like Soderbergh got fired from directing Moneyball
Right.
at the last minute, and as far as anyone can tell, it was purely an accounting thing. You know,
Uh-huh.
they realized that the name Soderbergh was going to give them X amount of return versus Y amount of return, and they wanted Y amount of return, you know?
Yeah, and to have for a guy of this caliber to have to deal with that, it's an insult to everything that is good in this in this life, not to mention art. I mean, Jesus, can anything be sacred? I mean, a guy who actually makes money on his pictures isn't allowed to go and friggin' make a fucking picture. It's ridiculous, But I mean,
It's making 10% back instead of a measly 5% back, you know?
I
Like, for
know,
fuck's sake, man.
I know. It's disheartening, man. But on the flip side of that, though, Hollywood's gonna, phase itself out, sort of like the music industry,
Yeah.
and then we'll probably just, guys like, I don't want to say guys like you and me, but there's a whole wave of people out there making pictures, and some of them are making good pictures.
I think to that end, I think there has to be a new. I think the financing system has to evolve. I think this entire system that exists right now is a ticking time bomb, and we saw what happened in the mortgage-backed securities industry, where 2008, almost the entire financial system collapsed because people were hedging their bets so much that they couldn't fail. And of course, that was just like pumping up a balloon until it blew up in everyone's face, right? And
Hmm.
I think the same thing is happening with film. I think they're, all these tentpole properties, these Iron Man 12 and Avengers and all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's going to blow up in everyone's face and then a new system is going to have to emerge out of that.
Yeah, and I think that new system sort of or it's on its way to emerging. I
Yeah.
think it's the online stuff
Yeah.
and stuff that's digital.
Yep.
So it's going to happen just like the music. Just like the music
I
thing.
think so.
Sooner or later, the movie industry is going to be scratching their
And
heads and be like,
hopefully
where
Soderbergh
did
comes
we
out of retirement
where
to
did we
join.
go wrong? Yeah, and he is. He's released films that are only available through on demand and streaming and that stuff. So he's very aware of what's going on, and I don't feel we have. I don't think we've seen the last of Mr. Soderbergh. Any closing comments before we sign off here?
Oh boy, I just think we should do I think we should do a Soderbergh retrospective to celebrate the guy's career. He's pretty brilliant, and I look forward to going back and checking his stuff out again.
Yeah, me too. I would love to go back to The Informant because I haven't taken. I saw it, but very casually, or I was exhausted. Or I was exhausted when I saw it, so I need to go and take a look at
I,
that and some of his other stuff. I mean, he's got so many films.
he's
Over
got
there, too.
TV series planned too, and boy, I tell you, my girlfriend and I just watched Scenes from a Marriage by Bergman from the '70s, and when a great talent like that takes a room and two actors, and suspends 6 hours or 8 hours of brilliant television. If Bergman can do that, I really look forward to seeing what Soderbergh can do on TV, because that's where it's at now, man. The TV is actually kicking movies' ass pretty good.
That's what I gotta look into it, man. I have such an aversion to television just for so long that I gotta take a look and see what's going on over
Yeah.
there. All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on, man. It's fun chatting with you as always, man. It's and especially about this film. I'm glad we did it. I was exhausted and I was almost not gonna. I almost called it off the late screening, but I'm glad we went through with it, man. It was fun.
Yeah, it's a blast, dude. Good chatting with you, and yeah, Soderbergh movies forever.
Okay. All right, guys. Hey, and thank you everybody for tuning in to the Cutting Room Movie Podcast. You can find all our stuff on the Cutting Room on www.thecuttingroompodcast.com, and we're going to be back with our feature episode on Thursday the 14th, and we'll be covering the films of Jean-Pierre Jeunet, and there's lots of fireworks on that episode, so tune in next Thursday, and till then, we're over and out. Later.